Hey y'all, good day to you again, and we are live again on Grief to Grace, this platform where we help to move from pain to purpose, where we move from being stuck to being unstuck. And I am your host, Ruth Hephzibah, and today I'm here again with an incredible speaker, an incredible guest in the house who is going to share her story with us. I tell you, like we always say, everyone's grief is different. And this, again, is another type of grief. So you're welcome to another moving episode of Grief to Grace. And I'm your host, Ruth Hephzibah. Today's episode is one that you won't want to miss, I tell you. So, here at Grief to Grace, like I said, well, I started, our mission is to transform your grief into grace, guiding you through from the darkest valleys of loss to the empowering heights of healing. So, where are you at today in your grief journey? We believe that even in the midst of our deepest pain, there is always a way to find purpose and emerge stronger. And that is why we are here. And that is why God gave us this mission and this purpose. We are not here to make a name for ourselves. We are not here to make a name to make sales or to do other stuff. We are here to share the glory of God as we have been able to move and we keep moving from grief to grace. And we are thanking God for all that He has done in our lives. And today we are looking at the story that is centered on leukemia. And our podcast title today is When Leukemia Took My Mom, But God Gave Me a Mission. So, are you one person God has given a mission, but you've allowed grief to becloud you and you're not seeing where you are supposed to go? In our last episode, we talked about people who have been able to move from grief to profit, from grief and their pains to being business owners, from their grief, being able to find purpose in life and being able to help their communities in their own little way. And some people have even gone international as a result of one common curse that we all have, which is grief. So don't be stuck where you are. Don't allow grief to take you away from God. Don't allow grief to take you away from your family. Don't allow grief to take you away from your community. I know it is hard. It is so hard. We cannot but just allow ourselves and begin to forgive, like we say here. Forgive yourself, forgive this situation, and forgive whoever must have caused you grief. So please, I beg you, this is not that season that we need to continue to dwell in it. This is the season that we need to grieve in a very healthy way. Okay, so now, where are you at in your grief journey? Yes, so children grieve, and today we'll be looking at a story from our guest who lost her mom at the age of 12, and she has a grief journey from that age. And today she's been able to channel her grief into purpose. And on that note, I will be welcoming to the stage right now Iyanu Ade. So she is our guest today, and she is the CEO of ToTsFrishion, and she has been able to move from the stages of grief and be able to channel it into purpose in her life. She lost her mom, like I said, to leukemia, and a loss that led her through a profound journey of grief. But rather than being consumed in her pain, Iyanu channeled it into something extraordinary. And behind the scene, we were just talking about how she is also trying to do some other stuff where she can raise up some good money to help people who have passed through this same situation. So you can imagine, you don't need to be stuck. You need to start thinking differently how you can help your community, how you can help the world. So she has created a mission, a movement where people can share their cancer stories and also find purpose in their pain. Her brand, ToTsFrishion, uses the power of business to inspire and uplift others through these shared experiences. So today I want to welcome Iyanu again to Grief to Grace. Thank you for being here and also for your willingness to share such a personal part of your journey. And I know that it is not so easy, but you have decided to share this story today to help others, and I'm super excited. I'm so glad, and I appreciate all that you do for your community. Thank you so much. So, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Ruth, thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you
Thank
so much.
you. And you know what? Her middle name is Ruth. Oh my God, so many Ruths. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. So, yes, without wasting so much of your time, the next voice you're going to hear is Iana's voice, and she'll be sharing her story from her time of grief when she lost her mom at the age of 12. Who says kids don't grieve? Children grieve. So hear her story.
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone who's listening. Thank you, Ruth, for having me on your show, Grief to Grace. It's such a pleasure to be here. And she has gave an extensive description of myself. And I am Iyanu Ade, also the mastermind, the CEO of ToTsFrishion. Um, so I'll dive into my own story. Um, I've had so many encounters with grief, from losing my mom at the age of 12 to leukemia to the loss of to grieving loss of like relationship, different type of relationships whereby at a young age you lose something, or maybe like a dating relationship you break up. That's a form of grief too, but today I will be mostly focusing on grieving the loss of my mom to leukemia, and like Ruth Hephzibah said, that led to a graceful, I would say, mission. And I'll say I can still recount the day I was told my mom died. Like, I literally was coming from school. I was still living in Lagos, Nigeria at that point. Coming from school and with my little sister, and when we got home, when we reached the doorstep, we just saw so many shoes sit in the front of the door, and I sensed an impending doom at that point, because I knew my mom was, at that point, she had struggles with leukemia diagnosis, and now she was in India receiving treatment. And at that point, I was just like, what's going on? Why is there so many shoes? We don't really entertain guests in the house. We don't do parties. So I'm like, why are there so many shoes? But for some reason, I just sensed that there was there's something wrong. And as I opened the door, I remember vividly, I just saw everybody was so sad. Their eyes were red. And I kind of scanned the room. I was looking and I was like, oh, that's my dad. Like, why is his eyes red? Why has he been crying? Because I've never really seen my dad cry before. So I was like, why is he crying? Must have been crying. What was wrong? And then all of a sudden, I just felt a hug from the back, and it was just said Roots, which is my middle name. And some people call me Young, some people call me Roots. And it said, Roots, your mom is dead. And I remember just slamming on the floor and letting out a big scream at that point. And it was at that point I knew what pain was. Not like physical pain at that point, but like mental pain, psychological pain, whereby you you lose someone that you've had a very sincere relationship with, because I was very close to my mom before she died, even at a very young age. And then I just found myself, even from that grieving time, I had to grieve a lot. And I found myself being angry at that point. I was angry at life, I was angry at God, and I questioned so many things. I was like, I prayed so much, even as a young 12-year-old. I prayed with all the stories in the Bible school, like of all the healing that Jesus did. Why is it that, why didn't God heal my mom? Like, why didn't he take away this leukemia, like all the stories that they told me in the Bible? Why is mine different? And for so long, I harbored that pain, I harbored that grief in me. And there were times that it got better, because I would go on for days, I would live life. And there'll be times I would regress back. I would just be bawling in tears, crying. And usually at that anniversary, which is November 26th of 2008, anytime November it gets closer to November 26th each year, those memories come back. And usually it would, at that point, before God helped me channel my pain into purpose, it was very, very hard. It was hard to the point whereby I started doubting if God was real. And I felt like I really love that process. Now I can boldly say I love the process of grieving. I love the process of God even making me doubt Him, because I feel like if I had not gone through that process, I won't have a sincere and a candid relationship with God right now. I won't be able to turn my pain into a purpose. And grief at that point, I would say grief in itself, grief as a whole, it forces you to widen your perspective, because through the grief, through the loss of my mom, I was able to widen my perspective. I was able to think outside the box. I was able to see, like, okay, I can't do this anymore. I need something greater than myself, something higher than myself to help me process this. And that's when I started seeking God more, started listening to God more. And it wasn't just a process whereby it went smoothly. No. It was hard. Some days were harder. Like I said before, some days were harder than the other. There were times whereby I would just lose myself, cry myself to sleep, wish things didn't go the way it did. But through that process, I feel like God now begin to put a desire for people who have gone through who have gone through loss of their loved one to cancer, or people who are going through cancer right now. And from that grieving process, I realized it forced me to grow too. Because as I said before, it also forced me to be a deep thinker. Because then I was now thinking, how can I use this grief? How can I not dwell in this? How can I bring out a mission out of this? And I began to see myself, rather than being a victim of this process, of this leukemia, of this ailment killing my mom, rather than me being a victim to it, how can I be a victor? And and as I begin to think about this, and I begin to grow, and I begin to live life, I but I begin to live my life I never considered before. And God saw me through that process. I would say He took me to a point whereby I just began to let go. And I remember the very first thing I did was to create a group on Facebook. I believe I was like 15 or 16 at that point. And I was just on this mission. I was like, let's wipe away cancer. I was like, this cancer, we're gonna get rid of it once and for all. So we're not gonna have this cancer in this world. But life happened, went into college, life happened, got busy with college, got busy with career, but that desire was still in me. That desire to be to turn my pain into a mission, to know that, like, to fulfill that verse that says all things work together for good. And I began to see that all things were actually working together for good. And through that, even through that process, God began to surround me with so many people. I had community of people who were loving, who were willing to take care of me and my sister at that point. And it was from that process, even after I created that group on Facebook, left it dormant for a little while, that desire was still in there. So I would say to you, like anyone that's listening, even if you've had a desire to do something and you feel like you've lost your track, as long as you go back to the originator of that desire, which is the Holy Spirit, which is God, it will still find your way. You still find yourself and you still find your way into it. And through the death of my mom to leukemia, I would say God gave me this mission, which brings me into my brand, ToTsFrishion. I've started this brand like 2020, I would say. Yes, I started selling products, but then this burning desire to tell cancer stories was still there. And as I begin to go through that process, it was a very difficult process for me because there were times where I can't really do this. I'm shy, and I was at that point. I at that point I was kind of coming out of being a people pleaser. I was like, what will people think of me? I don't want people to see me being talking about my dead mom. But something in me, which I believe is the Holy Spirit, was just like, if you don't tell your story, who will? You've been brought to this house not just to come and while away time, make money, get all the good things of life, but you've been brought to this earth to fulfill a purpose, to fulfill a destiny. And one thing that made me like really get on the show and be like, oh, I have to fulfill what God has told me to do was the parable of the 5 talents. And in the Bible, the parable of the talents in the Bible, whereby God gave one servant five, gave another one four or two, sorry, and gave another one one. And the one that got 5 talents doubled it. The other one who got two doubled it, I think two or four. And the other one who got one decided to go bury it. And my thought process was just like, I do not want to bury this God given desire that God has given me. I do not want to bury it because I don't want to be that person who just came to the world, who just went through this world, died, and did not have an impact. And God started showing me that all the people used in the Bible, they went through some form of grief. They went through some form of pain that God eventually used for his glory. Let's take a look at like Abraham. Abraham in the Bible, he went through his own grief. He went through the grieving process of like not having a child. Even Sarah went through the grieving process of not having a child, looking at people around her giving birth, having kids. And God is telling you you're gonna be father of many nations. Like what I'm like, what's up, God? I'm pretty sure Abraham was like, what's up, God? Like, what is going on? Like you told me you will make me father of many nations, whereby I have zero kid.
Mhm.
Also just started showing me other things too. Like even Anna in the Bible went through some form of pain, but turned it into a purpose. And even like Jesus Christ himself went through some form of pain. He went through grief, like when he was crying in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he was just crying and crying. That's some form of grief because it was like, Lord, don't let this cup, like let this cup pass over me, but not your will, but my not my will, but your will be done. And I had to get to that point whereby I said, Lord, this grief, I cannot deal with it anymore. I can't deal with it myself, not my will anymore, but your will be done. Because at this point in my life, I was just like, I can't deal with it anymore. And God started placing, like I said before, God started placing this desire for me to build a community whereby I bring people together to share their cancer stories. And through that, I was like, I've not done this before. But the good thing about when you're given the mission is God backs you up. Even if it's difficult, even if at some point you don't really know what to do, and I still struggle sometimes. I'm not, don't get me wrong, I'm not this kind of person who's always out there in my closet in my bedroom. I still cry. I'm like, Lord, I don't know what to do. Please help me. I'm like, Lord, please help me. But the thing I know is that His grace is always, 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 always sufficient for us, and His power is made perfect in our weakness. So I believe one thing that also helped me as a kid growing up was because my mom, may her soul rest in perfect peace, instilled in me instilled the relationship with God before she died. And I want to encourage people to, like, going through grieving process, find your way to God. No matter what it is, find your way to God. He's the only one that can give you perfect peace, even when you're struggling, when you think that things are not going as planned, when your world is crumbling down, it gives peace. And one of the Bible verse I would say I wanted to also share that, like, really reassured me during this time as I was growing up was First Thessalonians 4 verse 13 to 14, that says that we shouldn't be ignorant about people who fallen asleep. Like, people were falling asleep is just hypothetical. Like, for people who have died, that we cry and we sorrow as others who have no hope. For we believe as Christians that if Jesus died and rose again, we believe that God will bring with Jesus those who are fallen asleep in Him. And I remember the day I read this verse for the first time, it was like this peace that just came upon me, because I know that one day I'm gonna see her again. But on
Yeah.
one condition, as long as I keep myself and walk myself in Christ, I'm gonna see her again. If I don't, then there's no guarantee of me of seeing that. There's no guarantee of me seeing her again. So that really helped me through my grieving process. And the fact that, like, I had other people who surrounded me, and that led me to also bringing people to share their cancer stories, gathering people. And I would say this is more than just a mission. It's a movement, I would call it. A movement whereby we have people of like minds, people who have shared the same predicament, encouraging themselves through the power of storytelling. And even through that, I see ToTsFrishion beyond just sharing cancer story. Even with the, I know some at some point we'll be bringing in products to share, and through the products that we'll also share and we'll also sell, there will be avenue for you to use that as an avenue to carry and share your story. Because, like, when you people see that products, you'll be like, oh, this is the brand I bought it from, this is what they stand by, this is my story. So the encouragement goes on and on and on, and we're not living in isolation of ourselves. So that is majorly how God used my mom's death to leukemia and turned it into a life mission, I would say. And it's been a roller coaster, I would say. There are times whereby like I said before, I was up with all this motivation, and there are times I was not motivated in myself, and I had to encourage myself. I had to surround myself with people who will be there to lift me up when I could not lift myself up. And also, one thing I will also want to share is, as Christians, we should know that the Lord is close to those who are brokenhearted. And I remember anytime I would regress in my grieving journey, anytime I would go through that process of grief and I would regress, I had to remind myself that, like, He who has brought me to this point will see me through the rest of the way. And I had to remind myself that all things will work together for good, even in pain. All things will also work together for good. And it's also good for us not to dwell on that pain, because while we're dwelling on the pain, we become a victim to it. our lives are kind of like determined to it. But when we determine to bring ourselves out, we become a victor rather than a victim. So that's my, I would say, a process of, because it took me a long time, a process of years explained in like, I would say, 20 minutes.
Yeah, I can imagine. Thank you so much for sharing because I can resonate with you, especially when you talked about um, the death of your mom, coming
Mhm.
back from school that morning, that afternoon, and seeing the whole crowd. Like we talked about behind the scene. I'm as a mom. I most times when I see my kids, I know how much they're struggling. They struggle through, but I thank God today for the support and the help they're receiving. But it's never going to go like we want it to go,
Mhm.
because every time you hit a milestone, you will remember. So,
Yes.
are there moments in your life that you wished your mom was here?
Yes. I mean, there are times that I wish she was here. I remember there were times that I would say while I was in Nigeria, because my dad actually like remarried later. Um, but while I was in Nigeria before that, I remember there were times I just wanted to talk to someone like you going through your woman episodes, all those like boy problems,
Yeah.
dating problems. I have a crush in school, blah blah blah. And you just, and sometimes it's just so weird to talk to your dad. I hope my, well, if my dad is listening to this, oh well, it was weird to talk to you about it then, but now I, I'm free to talk to him about it now. But then, dad, it was weird to talk to you about it. Sorry.
Yeah. I can imagine. That's true because I know, because right now I have teenage children, kids, and I know how you like most times when you know there and now it's kind of, I understand very well where you're coming from because I have boys. I have four boys, so I know what it's like. When you want to talk to them, they really want to share something, and they're like, she's a woman. She may not understand. And most times I have to go down. I tell them, don't worry, I'm a man and a woman. Can relate with what you can. So I'm father and mother at this time. If God made me father and mother and took your dad away, then I'm father and mother at this time. You need to share your story. But the
Yes.
truth of the matter is there is a limit to what a woman can do and what a man can do. There
Yeah.
is a limit. There are some things I cannot teach them, and I thank God because sometimes God just sends help, to them because God is the father of the fatherless. That's what the Bible says. So He sends help somehow to people they can actually talk to and able to put them through some of this stuff that they need to talk
Mm-hmm.
about. And one of those things I learned through this process is that I need to listen to everything.
Mm.
Rush, the dating, anything you want to talk about it. Maybe I've not really, if their dad was there, I wouldn't have. Maybe I may not even want to listen to those stuff. But now I have to put my ears down and even bring up the gist sometimes. I'm like, oh, this gist, we need to talk about it. Okay. Who do you have a crush on today? And so they can just open up and talk about it. I know so well how well it feels for a lot of kids that are going through those moments. And so I really appreciate your ability to be able to share with us sincerely without looking backward. So,
Mm-hmm.
what was the hardest part of navigating your faith and your grief after losing your mom?
I would
So,
say, um,
how did you find your way back to God?
oh yeah,
Because
that was a good one.
it's difficult, for children. Like, I pray, thank God did it answer. It takes the grace of God. For I remember there were times my kids, there was a time my son would like, God does not heal.
Mm.
Because we had episodes of death, episodes upon episodes of death, and it was really like God doesn't heal. And I thank God today things are different, but at that moment, it was tough for me as a mom, seeing my kids break down in those moments because they they were almost losing it. So how did you feel, especially when you felt God didn't answer those little prayers of yours that you did in the same?
I really resonate with your kids because there was a point whereby I doubted God for so long. I was like I said before, I asked God, I was like, if you truly heal, then why didn't you heal my mom? Why did you allow her to die? And for a long time, I mean, I was still being, being a Christian, but I wouldn't say I had a very deep relationship with God then because, you as a kid, you just fall in and out. But it wasn't until the time that I realized that like all things work together for good.
Mm-hmm.
And I I later on realized that in his sovereignty, God still pulls out people from the deepest. I wouldn't really say I really know how God even brought me back, to be honest. I think it was just prayers. Prayers from people around, prayers from probably my dad. Or I sometimes I just tell to myself, I think I'm just special. I think God just loves me enough. I feel like you, no matter how deep you go, no matter how far you go away from me, I'm still gonna bring you back. Because I found myself doubting God at a point. Even when things were not going as planned, I found myself doubting God a lot. But I had to go through that process whereby God made me realize that, like, all things, like I said before, all things work together for good. And also being around people, like people who are also like-minded with you, who have the same belief as you, helped a lot. And I would say I found my way back to God not during my teenage years because I was just in and out. I was just living life. I would say it was in my 20s that I kind of like found my way back to God. And God used actually it's still in the process of doing it because I feel like my journey with grief to grace is not over yet.
Yeah.
It's a continuous journey, I would say. And that's what I also like to tell people that your journey of grief can take different turns and can take different processes. You're not going to get out of your grieving process in 1 year, in 2 years. It's okay for you to regress. It's okay for you to go back to that anger stage because there are different stages of grief. You have the anger, you have the bargaining. It's all, and sometimes you have the acceptance. There are sometimes, and you have also the depressive state. There's sometimes you get to the acceptance state and you go back to the depressive state, and that's okay as long as you realize that you pick yourself back up, which is what I did. And I would say, my dad played a very good role in navigating us, helping us after we lost our mom because he really took up the role of being a mother and a father at the same time, just like you're wearing both hats right now. I feel like the roles, once anything happens, it took it up because I remember back in Nigeria, we would just it drops us off at school. It will make our lunch for us, pack our lunch to school. So
That's awesome.
yeah, yep, I still remember all those. And I felt like it was the love it showed us, me and my sister, especially me, showed me that made me realize that, like, even in all this, God still loves us. And I said to myself right now, if my mom did not die, I would not be here encouraging people to share their cancer stories. If my mom did not die, there would not be ToTsFrishion, I would say.
Wow. That's
So
true.
I actually say that just like Jesus, I said this to someone one day. I was like, just like Jesus made a sacrifice on the cross for us, I feel like my mom made a sacrificial.
That's it.
she
But
adapted.
mostly that's how it works.
I don't know. I just see it now because I feel like without a death, without her dying, I won't be in this position right now. I won't be able to empathize with people. I won't be able to feel people's pain.
And you know,
And
that was the question I wanted to ask you next, which is um, if you could share moments where you feel your mom's presence guiding you through in this mission. And I really, because most times what people don't understand, like I've come to, before I underwent most of the things that I've
mm-hmm,
been through, I didn't realize anything. I didn't know anything about afterlife. I
mm,
didn't know anything about, and then, as a Christian, they tell you forget about the afterlife stuff and concentrate on things that are living. But over the years, I've come to realize that there is life after, like the Bible says. And these people, they pass away and they become saints, they become angels, and they guide us through our journey. If we ask, or sometimes we don't even ask for it and we just see their hand. So
yeah.
in this journey, have you been seeing your mom's hand in it all? Can you tell us how those moments you felt your mom's presence guiding you through?
Yeah, I would say overall, as a brand, as the mission of the brand, I would say it was from the pain and the grief that I felt as a result of a loss that paved the way for it. So I would say definitely yes, because without her passing away, I don't think I'll be in this position. I don't. If she was still alive at this point, what's cancer? I don't know. I won't have that. I don't think I will have that God given vision to actually bring community. I mean, sorry, bring people together and formulate a community whereby we can encourage ourselves to share cancer stories. So definitely yes. Yeah.
So thank you. So um um now I want to ask you to, if you can speak to people who, especially the young ones, who are navigating grief, who have lost their parents to cancer, like my kids, and so many other people. It may not be to cancer, some others maybe to whatever reasons, but they've lost a parent to death. And what would you want them to know? What would you want to tell them? Maybe they've lost hope, they've lost, because from what I do, I've realized that most of the people, underlying problems we have with people, for addictions and the
Hmm.
problems we have in the society today, especially with young people, has to do with an underlying grief. And that grief most times is as a result of multiple deaths, or a death of a parent, or separation, or just something that has gone wrong in the foundation. So would you want to speak to other young people who have lost a parent to cancer, or to any form of death, in quote, you know? So, what do you want them to know?
I would say it's okay to cry.
Yeah.
It's okay to cry. Even as guys, like people was like, "Oh, men don't cry." Please cry. It's part of your emotions. Please let it out. I feel like this because I am a crybaby. When I'm happy, sad, angry, I cry. I cry a lot, and I would say you should cry. Don't. How will I put this? Don't bottle everything inside of you. You have to let it out because the more you don't talk about things, the more you don't express your feelings, the harder it is for you to go through that process of grief. And I would say one thing that also helped me as a young person who lost my mom to cancer, I journaled a lot. I love journaling. I love writing. I journaled my feelings a lot. There were lies I was like, "Dear God, I am angry with you. Why did you take my mom away?" Like, just write it out because and write your process out. because at in the future you will look back at what you wrote and you will see growth in the way that you write, growth in the way you express your feelings. And also, one thing I would tell young people is seek God. Seek God. I know right now a lot of younger people don't really actually believe in God, but He is real. And there's a verse in Matthew 5, verse 4 that says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." He's the only one that can comfort you. The all the things that you seek for comfort, the drugs, the um I don't know, alcohol, sex, anything that you go to seek for comfort, they're just temporary. They won't relieve the grief that you're going through right now. They won't relieve that pain. They would not. The only person that can go through, that can help you with that grieving process, is God. He's there. And even when you don't feel him, because there was a time in my life whereby I felt like I did not feel God's presence. I was like, I can't feel you. And I remember writing that down. I wrote it down. I was like, it's like a poem I wrote, that I can't feel God's presence. And after that, I wrote that there were, I think it was few days afterwards, there was just this peace that came around me. And I know that, like, even when I don't feel God's presence, He's still there. And lastly, what I would say is find someone, like a mentor or a community, that is dealing with what you're going through. Just like, that's why actually I started the You Have a Story with ToTsFrishion. I started the podcast so that even if you're in your grieving process, you can listen to other people's story. You can see where people are coming from. You can see how they came out of that grieving process, and you encourage yourself. So those are those things: God, journaling, find a community. You can listen to, like, podcasts, like our podcast that just focuses on cancer, or people who've lost a loved one to cancer or passing through cancer. You can listen to that. Encourage yourself. But most importantly, don't go through this alone, and also express your feelings. Don't be afraid to express your feelings.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing. Thank you so much for coming over. I'm so excited. I'm so happy because this is one part of grief that touches my heart, because I know there are a lot of persons believe that kids don't grieve,
Mm,
because kids have a way of hiding their thoughts,
yes.
hiding their feelings, hiding everything that they're going through. And people don't see it, they don't understand that these kids are actually grieving. And
Mhm.
most times they just tell you, no, they don't grieve. You know, they don't grieve. Don't worry, they don't grieve. They do. So we as parents going through all what we go through, always remember your family. And
Yeah.
lately, like last week, there was something God showed me in the Bible, and that was in Isaiah. And it talked about fasting. And he said, why do I not accept your fast? And
Hmm.
he said, because that is not the kind of fast I want to
Yes.
do. And one of the things he talked about is that we should take care of our families,
Mm-hmm.
take care of those who are mourning, take care of those who are passing through issues. So that's the fast that he accepts. That's the fast that he wants from you as an individual, not you um skipping your meals, or doing wearing the clothes or wearing a look showing that you fast, but he wants you to take more care of your family, your loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
So have you forgotten your family because you're grieving? Yeah, we've all been in those shoes. I can remember them sometimes, especially when I was trying to heal more. And even when I realized I was grieving, let me put it that way, and most times, and I'll just come back home and go straight to bed and sleep.
Mm.
Okay. So I just know that God brought us here to talk about this for a reason. And I'm so excited that you shared this part today. And whatever you've shared, I know a lot of people are listening right now. And like you said, you are going to see your mom again. And that's what we should have. But if only we remain in Christ. So we will remain in Christ. We will continue to dwell in the faith we believe in, and we will allow ourselves to grieve in a very healthy way. Don't allow anybody to push you out of what you believe, out of the grief that you're going through, but don't calm yourself and don't grieve in an unhealthy way. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. I want to say thank you to Iyanu Ade Bite. I love you, and I know that God is here all the time to show you more love, and that what you've experienced so far is just beginning to tip the iceberg, because God is going to move you from one stage, this stage that you're at, and by this time next year, you will call me, you like Ruth said, God has done so good. For me and family. Thank you so much for coming. And for you out there, if you want to share your story, you can reach out to me on grief to grace now at gmail.com, or you can DM me on our social media platforms. And you can reach out to Iyanu on all of our social media platforms at ToTsFrishion, and you'll be able to her. And if you have a cancer story that you want to share, you can also reach out to her, and she is going to give you guidelines on how you can go about it. And if you look at the link below, I think we have links on how you can share your stories on cancer and all of our stories that we do. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I know that God brought us here for this reason. But no matter what, do not forget that God loves you. And do not forget this Bible verse that Jesus wept.
Mm.
So allow yourself to grieve. Till we meet again in our next episode, remember, I remain Ruth Hephzibah. Please do not forget to share um, this podcast. Don't forget to share our page. Don't forget to like it. And don't forget to pick up our book, which is a pen that rewrites grief. And I tell you, you will be glad you did. Have a very great day.